All right. Well, True Q. You know, this is one of those where I actually ended up thinking about this one for several days, trying to decide what I wanted to do with this one. And honestly, this is one of those episodes that goes so deep into Q on Q hijinks that anything you do with this is going to have the players being more or less spectators. Okay, yes, spectators who do sometimes do things to influence the queue, but the big players are going to be the queue. And the whole thing of Amanda Rogers and what have you. Yeah, very interesting story. Highly novel for when they did it. Replaying that in a TTRPG, you would probably be better off um doing a serial numbers filed off version and changing several aspects of it, because directly copying it is dumb. And two, doing one where you just change the names would make it a little too close to the original to actually make sense from an in-universe perspective, because the members of the Q continuum reacted in a very specific way. I'll just do a quick rundown of it. Is that this character here, being played by Olivia Dabo, is actually a Q. She was born thinking she was a human and grew up as a human. Then, after she became a young woman, she started to have Q powers manifest. Well, the members of the Q continuum, this is something that doesn't get explained in detail in TNG and gets examined in much greater detail in Voyager. But the members of the Q continuum have a rather delicate balance of power. And the idea of having a shift in that power balance is something that, well, for beings as powerful as they are, having a fight does things that are bad for the universe as a whole, because the collateral damage of the Q fighting each other is catastrophic to mere mortals. Anyways, though, so that is the reason why the Q found her existence to be so awkward and um, alarming. So that's the sort of reaction you would need to figure out how to manage if you decide to write a similar story to this. Because one, the members of the Q continuum are not going to ignore the existence of a random Q. They're an extremely old and extremely insular society, and they very, very greatly care about what other Q are doing. And in part, this is because the Q genuinely, has a group, don't want to demolish the universe. The exact specifics of this are not entirely explained ever, but they don't. In fact, that's something that the Q as a whole consider to be a crime, to, wander around the universe and just screw things up for the fun of it. Which is the reason why the John Delancey version of Q got imprisoned that one time. In the episode with this guy, Deja Q. This is True Q. I know, shockingly creative names. Anyways, the John Delancey Q was being punished for his misdeeds, the nature of which is never explained in the entire episode, by the way. Uh, One hypothesis, and this is something I talked about previously, is that the crime that Q committed, the John Delancey Q that is, committed that was so heinous that he was worthy of being stripped of his powers and forced to live out the rest of his life as a human, was creating the Calamarain. Yeah. Now, it is actually mentioned in the episode and directly stated that the Calamarain entity has some sort of vendetta against the John Delancey Q. It's not explained why, just that he'd, done something to them in the past. Um, yeah. Well, in the episode, you could reasonably draw a connection between the two things. Is that the Calamarain were hunting down the John Delancey Q because they hated his guts, and the whole thing just makes more sense if you assume that the Calamarain hunting him was connected to the fact that he was being punished. Because otherwise, it's a hell of a coincidence, and you're like, that doesn't sound right. Anyways, moving on. So, with that in mind, what exactly um, would that tell you about doing something like this? Because Amanda Rogers um, doesn't really understand what it means to be a Q, and that's the core problem with the character. She, in her academic work, prior to uh, uh, deciding whether she wanted to join Starfleet, because like, she was at Starfleet Academy uh, at the time that she was sent to the Enterprise D. So, but she had done quite a lot of academic work prior to this, where neurobiology, plasma dynamics, and eco regeneration. When you stop and think about this, you realize those are completely different fields of study. Understanding one of them has very little to do with the other two, which is one of those things like, oh, she's really, really talented. Yeah, superhumanly intelligent. That was actually one of those things that came up in Deja Q, is that when the John Delancey Q got turned into a human temporarily, he claimed to have superhuman intelligence even in that form because of the fact that he still had the knowledge of a Q. And, things man was not meant to know and stuff like that. And his human sort of mind was able to understand all of that stuff, which this suggests that her academic accomplishments were a sign that she had a superhuman intellect, and that was how she was able to complete so much academic work so easily. And of course, the stuff that they have her do on the Enterprise is seemingly trivial and mundane things, but it's the sort of things that you would do. It's like, okay, you claim that you're really good at calibrating stuff, right? Well, here, calibrate these. And then just to give someone a easy way to demonstrate their abilities. And then, of course, they have this hilarious scene where, as Amanda is attempting to understand how to use her abilities, she starts teleporting around into places that mere humans should not be. Anyways, but yeah, it's like the basic gist of this, though, is it's Amanda Rogers coming to accept what it means to be a Q. The actual um what would be the equivalent of the players in the story are mostly there to watch. However, there is a key thing that happens that is something that would be a crucial thing that for players is that Picard, when investigating Amanda Rogers' past, realized that the accident that supposedly killed her parents, her actual Q parents, that is, was physically impossible to be an accident because it was a tornado that just appears, kills them, and leaves. Doesn't even kill Amanda. It just kills them. Only those two people, no one else. And it appeared in an area that had elaborate high tech weather control stations that were designed to prevent the formation of tornadoes. And we have this extra pinpointed tornado just kill two people in an area that has weather control devices designed to prevent the formation of tornadoes. Revealing that to Amanda was the single most important thing that any of the members of the Enterprise crew actually did in the course of the events. Most of it is just, being supportive and encouraging. They don't really know what's going on. They don't really know how to help her because they're not Q. And these are Q problems that require Q solutions. So the, you know, main cast just sit around and try and figure out what's going on. And, anyways, so the apocrypha with her is that she does actually kind of sort of get reused in some of the books, I think, but none of the actual TV show episodes mention her ever again. She goes like the Q and the Gray. That episode is the thing that goes the hardest into the Q as a civilization, and it doesn't really talk about her. Doesn't even mention she existed. See, there is actually one thing that's a crucial difference between what the female Q and the John Delancey Q do to create Q Junior that is significantly different from Amanda Rogers. And that is Amanda Rogers' parents were pretending to be humans at the time, and everyone thought that Amanda Rogers was a human when she was born. I mean, she's actually a Q because reasons, but yeah. The John Delancey Q and the female Q, when they create Q Junior, don't pretend to be humans in the process. Yeah, it is actually highly implied, although not directly stated, that as a general rule, the Q are they just don't reproduce. It's not that they can't, apparently, it's just they don't. They don't want to because reproducing upsets the delicate balance of their society. It's like having a spinning plate. If the plate is unbalanced, it wobbles while it spins and then maybe falls over and breaks, which is kind of like that thing in Voyager when we have the Q Civil War. And thus is the reason why the Q were so greatly interested in Amanda Rogers' existence is that she's a loose cannon, a rogue agent, someone who needs to be, brought into the fold so that she doesn't create problems for the other Q, so to speak, anyways. Something very important to remember about the Q is that because of their pseudo omniscience or whatever the flip they want to call it, when the other Q are doing things, the other Q know about it. So they can't, it's difficult for them to hide things from the other Q. Saying that they can't is seemingly inaccurate because uh, Amanda Rogers' parents did, in fact, hide from the Q continuum long enough to procreate and create Amanda. Obviously, that didn't last, but, so yeah. Anyway, doing a story that goes this hard into the bizarre politics of um, the Q being Q and doing Q things for Q reasons. This is not the only episode of Star Trek that did that. As I mentioned, there have been several that did that. It's something that's very rare because usually you just have one of the Q annoying people, usually the John Delancey Q, and don't have the other Q doing anything. Which is interesting because it's hinted in some of the stories that the John Delancey Q is, well, probably the single most annoying to the other Q of all of the Q. Because of the fact that, well, as Q2 put it caused them embarrassment. Anyway, though, that's all I can think of say here. It's a fun idea of having a Q-centric story. This particular one is not one that I would choose to adapt because of the fact that it's a coming of age story for an adolescent Q. And that means that the story is going to be excessively focused on an NPC that's not going to be controlled by one of the players. Probably. I mean, if you really wanted to, that would probably be a bad idea, but you could have a player play the character, equivalent of Amanda Rogers. I don't think it's a good idea, though. At any rate, see you guys later.